What if I told you that by 2040, Australia is going to look almost nothing like it does today? Not just a little different, completely transformed. We're talking about a country that's quietly setting itself up to double its entire economy, and most people outside of Australia have absolutely no idea this is happening. Today, we're going to change that. Stay with me through this video because some of what I'm about to share is going to genuinely surprise you, and trust me, you do not want to miss the project we talk about halfway through because it might just be the most ambitious infrastructure plan any country has attempted in the last 50 years. Welcome back to The Drive Intel, where we dig deep into the stories that are actually shaping our world. If you're new here, now is a great time to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because we cover exactly this kind of content every single week. The big moves, the bold plans, and the futures that are being built right now while most of us are looking the other way. So let's talk about Australia. When most people think about this country, they think about the Sydney Opera House, kangaroos, beautiful beaches, and maybe the Great Barrier Reef. And yes, all of that is real and all of that is stunning. But underneath that postcard image, something enormous is taking shape. Australia has quietly become one of the most strategically important countries on the entire planet. And its government, its private sector, and its international partners are all betting billions, in some cases hundreds of billions of dollars, on what this country can become by the year 2040. To understand where Australia is going, you first need to understand where it stands today. Australia currently has a GDP of roughly 1.7 trillion US dollars, making it one of the top 20 economies in the world. For a country with only about 26 million people, that is an extraordinary achievement. But here's the thing. The people running Australia's economic future are not satisfied with that. They see a window, a very specific window between now and 2040, where global conditions, technological shifts, and strategic geography all align in Australia's favor. And they are moving fast to take full advantage of it. The first pillar of this transformation is something called the green hydrogen revolution, and it is hard to overstate how significant this is. Australia has been blessed with something most countries can only dream about: enormous amounts of land, incredible solar radiation, and powerful wind resources along its coastlines. When you combine those natural gifts with the falling cost of electrolysis technology, which is the process used to produce hydrogen from water, you get a recipe for becoming the world's dominant green hydrogen exporter. And Australia is leaning into this hard. Projects like the Asian Renewable Energy Hub in Western Australia are already in development. This single project alone is planned to cover an area larger than some small countries, using a combination of solar and wind power to generate green hydrogen and ammonia for export, primarily to Asia. Japan, South Korea, and Germany have all signed agreements to purchase Australian green hydrogen as they push to decarbonize their own heavy industries. The projected economic value of Australia's hydrogen exports by 2040 could reach into the hundreds of billions of dollars annually. This is not a small side project. This is Australia positioning itself to be the energy superpower of the Southern Hemisphere. Now here is where the story gets even more interesting. Australia is not putting all of its eggs in one basket, and that's exactly what makes this economic transformation so credible and so durable. While the green hydrogen boom is being built out in the West, something equally exciting is happening in the Northern Territory in Queensland. Australia sits on some of the richest deposits of critical minerals on Earth. We're talking about lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earth elements, and vanadium. These are the materials that are absolutely essential for building electric vehicle batteries, wind turbines, solar panels, and all of the technology that the global clean energy transition depends on. For decades, Australia was content to dig these materials out of the ground and ship them overseas as raw ore, letting other countries do the refining and manufacturing and capture most of the value. That era is ending. The Australian government has launched a critical mineral strategy that is designed to move the country up the value chain. Instead of exporting raw lithium, Australia wants to export battery-grade lithium hydroxide. Instead of shipping unprocessed rare earths, it wants to be home to refining facilities that process those materials into high-value components. The investment being directed toward this sector is staggering, with billions of dollars in government support, private equity, and foreign direct investment all flowing into Australian processing facilities. The Pilbara region of Western Australia is already seeing this shift in real time. Companies are building facilities there that will take lithium from Australian mines and turn it into battery materials right there on Australian soil before shipping them to gigafactories in Asia, Europe, and North America. This one shift alone could add tens of billions of dollars to Australia's annual export income by the mid-2030s. And when you pair that with the hydrogen exports we already talked about, you start to see the outline of an economic machine that is genuinely world-class. But let's talk about the project I promised you earlier, because this one is truly remarkable. It is called Sun Cable, And if it works the way its developers envision, it will be one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. Here's the basic idea. In Australia's Northern Territory, there is enough sunshine hitting the ground every single day to power many countries simultaneously. Sun Cable wants to build a massive solar farm in that region, one of the largest ever constructed, and then transmit the electricity it generates through a high-voltage direct current undersea cable that stretches all the way to Singapore, roughly 4,500 kilometers away. Singapore would then use that power to run its economy and potentially distribute it further into the broader Southeast Asian grid. The sheer ambition of this project makes your head spin a little when you think about it. An underwater power cable running for thousands of kilometers across the ocean floor, delivering Australian sunshine to one of the world's busiest commercial hubs. The project has faced some financial turbulence along the way, as you might expect for something this unprecedented, but it has also attracted serious attention from serious investors. And the Australian and Singaporean governments have both signaled support for its development. If Sun Cable reaches completion anywhere near its planned timeline, it will fundamentally reshape how Southeast Asia is powered, and it will make Australia an energy exporter in the most literal and dramatic sense imaginable. Now, at the Drive Intel, we always try to give you the full picture, so let's talk about the human infrastructure that has to grow alongside all of these physical projects. Because here is the challenge. You cannot build a green hydrogen hub, a critical minerals processing industry, and an undersea power cable without a workforce that knows how to do those things. Australia's population of 26 million is relatively small for the scale of ambition we are discussing. This is why Australia's immigration and education policy is becoming just as important to its economic future as its mining policy or its energy policy. The Australian government has been systematically targeting skilled workers in engineering, technology, renewable energy, and advanced manufacturing. It has restructured its visa programs to make it faster and easier for people with the right skills to build lives in Australia. At the same time, Australian universities are rapidly expanding their programs in engineering, data science, and clean energy technology. Cities like Brisbane, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Perth are all seeing significant investment in innovation precincts, basically geographic clusters where universities, startups, and established companies sit side by side and collaborate on solving hard problems. This is the model that worked in Silicon Valley and in Singapore, and Australia is replicating it deliberately and at scale. Speaking of cities, let's talk about what is happening to Australia's urban landscape, because this is another dimension of the transformation that often gets overlooked. Australia's cities are in the middle of a massive infrastructure build-out. Melbourne is expanding its metro rail network with the Metro Tunnel Project, a multi-billion-dollar underground rail line that is adding significant capacity to one of the Southern Hemisphere's busiest public transit systems. Sydney is developing its own metro network, connecting suburbs and business districts in ways that were not possible before, and fundamentally changing how millions of people move around the city every day. Brisbane is preparing to host the 2032 Olympic Games, and the investment being made in transportation, venues, accommodation, and digital infrastructure in that city is transforming it into a genuinely world-class destination. But perhaps the most interesting urban development story in Australia right now is happening not in the big established cities, but in the emerging growth corridors of southeast Queensland, the area stretching from the Sunshine Coast through Brisbane down to the Gold Coast. This region is growing faster than almost any other major urban area in the developed world, and the infrastructure investment being directed there is extraordinary. New rail lines, new hospitals, new university campuses, new technology parks, and new commercial precincts are all going in simultaneously. The population of this region is expected to grow by millions of people over the next 15 years, and every one of those people will need housing, healthcare, education, and transportation. That is an enormous amount of economic activity, and it is just one part of the story. We also need to talk about Australia's defense economy, because this is another area where investment is scaling up dramatically and where the economic implications are profound. Australia is in the middle of the most significant defense expansion in its modern history. The AUKUS agreement between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States is going to result in Australia acquiring nuclear-powered submarines, built in part on Australian soil. That single program is expected to generate hundreds of thousands of jobs in engineering, manufacturing, and skilled trades over the next 2 decades. The shipbuilding and defense technology ecosystem that will have to be built to support it will create an entirely new industrial base in Australia, particularly in South Australia, where much of the work is expected to be centered. And the defense expansion does not stop with submarines. Australia is investing in long-range missile systems, cyber capabilities, space technology, and drone development. All of these programs require highly skilled workers, advanced manufacturing facilities, and deep supply chains. They also attract foreign investment from defense contractors who want to be positioned near Australia's growing capabilities. The total defense spending increase over the next decade is projected to run into the hundreds of billions of dollars, and much of that money will circulate through the Australian economy, creating jobs, building companies, and developing technologies that often have civilian applications as well. Now let's zoom out for a moment and think about why all of this is happening right now. The answer has a lot to do with geography and geopolitics. Australia sits at the junction of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, right at the edge of the most economically dynamic region on Earth. Southeast Asia and East Asia together are home to more than half of the world's population and are expected to account for the majority of global economic growth over the next 2 decades. Australia is perfectly positioned to be a supplier, a partner, and a hub for that growth. It has political stability, strong rule of law, excellent universities, deep ties to both Western nations and Asian economies, and natural resources that the world desperately needs. When you put all of that together, the case for Australia's economic rise becomes extremely compelling. The International Monetary Fund and various economic research institutions have modeled scenarios in which Australia's GDP reaches or approaches $3.5 trillion by 2040, more than double its current level. The specific number will depend on how well these projects are executed, how favorable global conditions remain, and how effectively Australia manages the social and environmental dimensions of this transformation. But even in more conservative scenarios, the growth trajectory is impressive and the structural changes being put in place are real. What does this mean for ordinary Australians? It means more jobs, higher wages in industries that are growing, better infrastructure, and a government with more fiscal capacity to invest in healthcare, education, and social programs. It also means some hard transitions for communities that have depended on older industries, particularly traditional fossil fuel extraction, as the global energy mix shifts and Australia reshapes its own export portfolio. Managing those transitions fairly and effectively will be one of the biggest tests of Australian political leadership over the coming years. And what does it mean for the rest of the world? It means that Australia is going to have a much louder voice in global affairs. A country with a $3 trillion economy and critical mineral resources and green energy export capacity and nuclear-powered submarines is a country that other nations pay close attention to. Australia is already stepping up its role in Pacific diplomacy, in global climate negotiations, and in the Indo-Pacific security architecture. By 2040, it will likely be doing all of that from a position of significantly greater economic and strategic weight. Here at the Drive Intel, we find this story genuinely fascinating, not just because the numbers are big, but because it is a story about a country making deliberate choices. Australia is not just hoping that good things happen, it is identifying where the world is going, understanding what it uniquely has to offer, and then making the investments and the policy decisions needed to get there. That is a model that a lot of countries could learn from, and it is the kind of story we love to tell. If you have made it this far in the video, first of all, thank you, because it means you are the kind of person who wants to understand the world at a deeper level, and that is exactly who the Drive Intel is made for. We would love to know what you think about Australia's transformation. Are you surprised by the scale of what is being planned? Do you think it will actually come together by 2040? Or do you think there are obstacles we haven't fully accounted for? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because honestly, some of the best conversations we have happen right there in the comment section, and we read more of them than you might expect. If this video gave you something to think about, please share it with someone who would find it interesting. It genuinely helps this channel grow and allows us to keep making content at this level. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the perfect moment to do that. There is a lot more coming on the Drive Intel, and you do not want to miss what we have lined up next.